very good evening. Welcome to the Friday Conversation. If you're a regular participant with us, you'll know the format that Fiona and I, my wife, I'm Clive, if you don't know who we are, but we have a conversation and invite you to join in. If it is the first time you're meeting with us, a very warm welcome to you. We hope you enjoy this evening. Fiona should not be here. I should be having the conversation with Verity, but unfortunately later yesterday afternoon she became not well and a bit of a temperature. Had a test today, we're waiting for the results tomorrow, so we will be praying for her later on. So Fiona has joined me for the conversation. I was looking forward to talking with Verity.
She was looking forward to it. She did a lot of work for it, so it's a real shame.
So Verity, if you are well enough to join in, all those copious notes, if you'd like to write them in, we can all share them, okay? But we're sorry that you're not well enough to be here. So our subject in the series is looking at the 10 Commandments, but in the light of the New Testament. And last week Fiona and I did an introduction. If you haven't seen that, you may care to watch it another time. Just saying how the Old Testament relates very well to the New Testament. It's one book, it's one message. Although we call it Old and New Testament, and they're divided in our Bibles. It's the revelation of God, the whole of what He wanted to say.
Yes.
On that, I just want to mention one thing. If you were with us last week, I did give an illustration from Bishop Ryle. I'm going to repeat it. He said that the gospel in the Old Testament is like a flower in bud, but we see the gospel in the New Testament as a flower in full bloom. So the gospel is all there in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, the full revelation of what was there is now obvious. And I said, no idea who Bishop Ryle is. Well, I do now know. I was talking to a Catholic priest this week, and his name happened to crop up in conversation, and this priest was brought up in Liverpool, and Bishop Ryle was the first Anglican bishop in Liverpool even before the cathedral was built. So he was a bishop without a cathedral, and that was in the late 1800s, and he'd written quite a few commentaries. It's just interesting, you say something and then bits of the jigsaw puzzle come together. Before we start our discussion, I'm going to pose two questions that you may care to put your answers in. If you write in on the live chat, then we'll repeat them and we'll respond to them. Two questions we'll come to later. What is worship? And what is it that only belongs to God in our worship? Okay? So what do we mean by worship? And what by right only belongs to God? There might be other questions that come up, but two to get you going.
Yes.
Okay.
And doubtless people will have some comments.
Comments?
Yeah. Yes. So we're on the first commandment of the 10 tonight, aren't we?
Do you want to read that, Fiona?
Yeah. What? Just the
yes, just
the one.
The opening verse. Like Exodus chapter 20.
Exodus chapter 20. Yes. And God spoke all these words: I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. And that's where we're doing tonight, isn't it?
Okay. I thought, and Fiona agrees with me, which is always useful. We don't always, but tonight we have. I thought it would be good again to look at that verse in the context of the Old Testament. The helpful approach is, what did it mean then, and what was the setting, and so what does it mean now? Because the series is the 10 Commandments, but in the light of the New Testament. But we need to understand what was being said.
Oh, well, that's right. Yes,
originally,
when these were first given to them.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Okay.
so Fiona's got to start us off.
Well,
I love passing the ball over.
Of course, the first thing we get in Exodus chapter 20 is, and God spoke all these words. And I think that's one of the absolute fundamental thing, that these are words that came from God. Mm-hmm. They're not the result of people having ideas and having a sort of mind, brainstorming session and coming up with some generally agreed notions, which might vary from culture to culture, whatever. It definitely is a very dogmatic statement there. God spoke these words.
Yes.
They're actually his words, his commands. And it's, the whole thing is set out like a king's treaty would be. And it's very clear that this is not a sort of a mutual agreement, with conditions on it. Actually, God has set out the conditions, God has set out the terms, and people accept or reject them.
Yes.
And there'll be consequences according to what decision you make. But it's very clear, that it is absolutely categorically stated that the reason these commands are to be obeyed is because God spoke them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Later on in the chapter, as we have it, in verse 22, the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites this, you have seen for yourselves that I have spoken to you from heaven." And it is this Moses going up to meet God. So it isn't a democratic consensus. What do we think is the best way? This is, we know it was written on tablets of stone, and usually people think it's 5 on one and 5 on the other. Some commentators are saying actually there were 2 identical tablets because in a treaty both parties keep it, and both tablets were sort of kept secure in the Ark of the Covenant. But it is directly from God, a meeting between Moses and the Lord.
It's not sort of Moses and the Israelites sort of requirements from God and his requirements from them. It is totally a one-way command point here. Yes.
One of the obstacles people might have when we're, as Christians, looking at the laws in the Old Testament, they get a bit confused by saying, well, in the New Testament we're saved by grace, we're not saved by the good works that we do. And then people think, well, if you're going back looking at the laws of the Old Testament, are we trying to sort of curry favour with God? We're trying to be good enough for him. And I think we need to establish again the context in which these commands were given, because when people hear commands they think, oh well, I've got to do that, so I'm seen to be obedient and pleasing, and that'll put me in good books, which is not because how it's meant to be.
Well, again, with this first command, it actually begins with a statement from God. It says, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery." So it's like it's on this basis that I'm your God, because I have rescued you from slavery. I have brought you out, and I'm going to have a great purpose for you. But the whole thing is based on the fact that God has already delivered them. It's not, if you keep these commands, I'll think about delivering you. These commands weren't given while they were slaves in Egypt. It's, having come out, having come through the Red Sea, having been miraculously delivered and seen their enemies defeated, now here is what it means to live as a redeemed, delivered people who belong to God.
As always, and there's quite a few comments coming in, and remind me we need to go back and
we will
refer to that. We're just going to take a moment and just in this context, then we'll come to worship and things like that. And Verity's begun to give us all her notes, which is lovely. But one of the things I read, one of the commentators said that God gives the law not that they might be redeemed, he gives the law because they are redeemed. Can I say that again? He doesn't give the law, he gives the law not that they might be redeemed, but he rather gives the law because they are redeemed. And rescued out of slavery, they become his own possession. Now, as the people of God, our response to that redemption is we want to do what is right in your eyes.
Yes, exactly. It is. It should be the response to his grace in rescuing them should be that they want to love and obey and learn his ways, which of course is very much the same in the New Testament, although deepened and broadened and much more clearly in the flower as opposed to the bud. But here in the bud, it's the same principle. That actually the life of obedience follows on from having been rescued out of slavery.
Yes. Again, another commentator made a statement which I'm going to repeat, but could be misunderstood. But I hope in the way that we're talking now, it's not understood. He said, "Grace leads to law," which is interesting, isn't it? Because Jesus says, "A new commandment I give you," and it's not a law in harsh dictatorship, but these are the principles. These are the ethics. These are the norms of the kingdom, as the laws of physics. It's what makes things work.
Yes.
And grace leads to actually this is the outworking of it, which I think makes sense to me.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Alec Motcher said that. The grace that saves preceded the law that demands.
Yes. Verity, I will quote you, because you should be here doing this. We love because he first loved us. That's what the New Testament says. And it is a response there. Yes.
Yes.
And say the Lord's saying, "I've redeemed you, and now this is how I want you to live." I find it helpful that He has laid out these, what we call 10 Commandments, but so it's not left up to us to say, "Well, what's the best way to do it?" If we're going to obey in loving response, then we need to know what to obey.
Yes. Yeah.
And He's brought them out of Egypt. They're going into the land of Canaan. They are surrounded by other nations whose standards, their morals, their religious practices are so opposite to what the people of God are going to be. So they're like cocooned. And surrounded by these other nations, but God places them there, but stipulates how different they're going to be. And that which comes to the first commandment.
Yes, because obviously, both in Egypt, where they've just come out from, and in Canaan, where they're going to, and in all the places they go through on the way through the wilderness, there are going to be lots of other nations worshipping other gods of a very different sort, because they're not gods. But yes, that's one of the things that the danger point always is, that they begin to get assimilated into the Canaanite culture,
which is exactly happened when Moses was a long time up the mountain.
Yes.
They built the golden calf, the bull.
Yes, that's right. Because even though this was such a fearsome thing, Verity sort of made comment back, how they'd, in verse 18, they saw the thunder and lightning, heard the trumpets, saw the mountain in smoke, and were trembling with fear. They stayed at the bottom. Well, they weren't allowed to go up, but they actually asked Moses to speak to them. They don't want to hear God directly because he's so fearsome and so overwhelming. And yet when he was up there for a long time getting these commands, while he's up there, they begin to lose patience and decide they'll make their own god, and they make this golden calf. Which
is exactly what the other nations do and did.
Yes. Yes, I mean, next week Jackie and I are talking about the making of idols.
So we won't go there.
We won't sort of develop that too much.
No.
But the key thing is that they actually began to sort of think, oh, well, we need a god, and this one seems to be absent with Moses up a mountain. He may never come back. And so they actually started breaking that first commandment even before they'd actually got the commands.
Yes. Let's go to actually wording of the text. You shall have no other gods before me. And I asked the question, what is worship? And when we think about it, well, in my mind, Phil might think differently. But if another person said to us, I'm first above everything, above everybody else, we'd think they've got a problem. They're a bit big-headed. And here is God saying that he has first place and no rivals, nothing to compare with him. And I was thinking about this, and how is it that God can say, worship only me? But then Wayne Grudem, who's written a book of theology, his answer is that if the best thing for us as people, if the best thing for us is to know God and to worship him, if that's the best, that's the most enriching, most fulfilling, the right thing, if it's the best thing to know God and to worship him, it would be unloving not to set that out as the first and primary principle. He would be withholding what is best, and love always. And God says it because he is God.
I think that's a very key thing, because one of the reasons why we tend, and you hear people who don't know the Lord sort of saying it, that we tend to sort of think, oh well, if somebody says you've got to worship only me, yes, they're very arrogant, but that's because if it was another person saying it, it would be very arrogant. If I was to say to you, like, your entire life has to be about me now, you have to worship me, and it all has, you sort of think, goodness me, who do you think you are?
Yes.
And it would be because that would mean I'm thinking I'm God and that everything should be arranged around me. But he is God. Everything exists because he made it.
Well, it starts with that phrase, I am, doesn't it?
Yes.
Which is his name.
Yes.
I am the one who is. Was and always will be.
Yes.
The source of everything.
Yes. And so actually, this is simply a statement of fact. I am God, he says. Yes. And what's more, he is the only God.
Yes.
Worthy of worship.
Yes.
The others, and as I say, we'll do more about it next week as to why they're not worthy of worship. But yes, this is because he is God.
Yes.
And he is worthy of worship. And it's the only appropriate response. And the very idea, obviously, because we, because to us he's immortal, invisible, God only wise, and we can't see him, we often don't sort of realise, because we couldn't live if we did see him face to face in our present state. But we sometimes forget, that actually if you were looking at him face to face, you would not feel, now I need to tell you a thing or two and sort of explain to you how to run the universe. You would actually be flat on your face saying, you are God.
Yes, yeah.
What's your will? That would be the appropriate response.
Sometimes in conversations people say, well, I don't believe in God, or prove that there is a God. The Bible never sets out to prove the existence of God. It's stated as a fact. Genesis chapter 1, in the beginning, God. Taken as read, because this is God's revelation of himself. He doesn't need to prove himself, because he is who he is.
Yes.
I am Lord, brought these people, and the evidence is in the redemption of his people, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament.
Yes.
Yes,
they had already seen.
Yes.
They had seen him deliver. Well, they'd seen what he did in Egypt with all those plagues. They'd seen the great deliverance. They'd gone through the parted Red Sea. They'd seen their enemies destroyed in the sea. Now they're standing at the foot of this mountain, which is, with the Lord's presence, and it's shaking and overwhelming. there's no question about, well, does he exist? I mean, you'd have to be very determinedly hardened, like Pharaoh was, to try and say, I don't need to take notice of this God.
Yeah. Which, just on the flip side of that, if this was given, excuse me, I need to get a drink. My voice is gone. Fiona, you can talk. Carry on. I've just got a frog in my throat.
Have you got water in there?
Yes. Okay.
Sorry. Shall I look at some of these comments while you're just getting a drink? Let me have a little look. Yes, Verity is definitely giving us lots of her input here. We obey out of love as he loved us. He showed his love in this context through releasing them from slavery. And the commandments are actually very broad. He doesn't micromanage us, quoting Jackie. We have such freedom within these commands. And yes, we will be looking that actually here in these, it's not lots of pettifogging little rules.
No.
They're broad commands, but they actually do bring freedom. Yeah. And she says, Jesus says, seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. All these things will be given to you as well. It makes sense for this to be first, because we should seek him first in everything.
Yes.
So that this is the absolute foundational command, is the relationship between God and his people, the establishment that he's God, we're not, and that actually he is the one who's setting rules. So actually it is absolutely foundational that we get the relationship with him as the foundation.
Which, if we thought this was the Ten Commandments were given just to everybody, and if you obey them, you'll be okay with God. Well, some people don't believe in him. They don't like him. They've got problems with God. They're not going to worship him.
No.
And putting him first is a choice that we make. This isn't imposed. Now the day will come when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus is Lord.
There'll still be the choice as to whether you're in or out of his kingdom.
Yes.
But that will be the choice.
Yes. Yes. But here it's an invitation to us who know him, just to see the worth, the treasure. Which let's mention. I was having a drink, so I wasn't quite listening. Did you all these questions on what is worship? Let's go back to
Let's go back to those, right?
Because we want to talk into the New Testament.
Maggie started that off.
Have you got that one? Yes.
Yes. Maggie's put, worship is acknowledging that God alone is perfect and worthy of our praise, both with our lips and with our lives.
Yes.
And that's what worship means. It's the offering of everything. It's not just singing a few hymns and
we'll come to that. Yes. Did you read the next comment?
And the next one, yes. Perfection only belongs to God. He alone sustains the universe. He alone is worthy of worship and needs to be first in our lives.
Yes.
Maggie's got it very firmly there.
And Richard's got that. It's quite a helpful phrase. We talk about worship. And Richard's commented that it's worthship, giving him his worth.
Yes.
In Revelation, that all honour and power and
worthy are you. That's
belongs
the point.
To him.
Yeah. Yes. If it means that's what he deserves. It's what's right and appropriate for him. Yes.
We'll just take a moment because there's lots of comments coming in.
Maddie says, thank you both. It's making even greater sense to me. He's a loving father, so it's beginning to come. Yes, understand who he is. Yes.
Okay, that's good. So let's talk about how this applies as Christians. Or one of the things we're looking at is, are these Ten Commandments, are they repeated? Are they endorsed in the New Testament? Obviously, this was to the people of Israel, the Jewish nation as they became known. Jesus was a Jew. His ministry was conducted amongst the Jews in the land of Israel. So these commandments would have been an integral part of his life and the life of the community, those people.
Yes. And And when somebody asked him which is the greatest one, and he summed them all up, the first thing he said, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and then your neighbour as yourself. So actually the first commandment is that. And of course Jesus, he said he only did what the Father told him to do. So actually in everything he sought the Father's will and did the Father's will. And when the devil offered him an easier option for getting all the kingdoms of the world by worshipping him, he just said, no, it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God and him only shall you serve. And so, you know, Jesus clearly was totally endorsing this. This one still applies, folks.
Well, who wouldn't want it to apply? Exactly. So,
well, when you see all those other nations that were around them and the hideous things that were happening in their temples, I'm so glad that the true God is this one.
Yes. If you do comparative religions, and in some of my work I come across the faith and the faith practices of other people, and I'm just so grateful that we don't have to appease or cajole or make sacrifices. That our response to God is, as Verity said, because he first gave everything to us, so we're not trying to get on his good side
or prevent him doing anything nasty to us,
no,
you know, by some kind of manipulation technique.
And when Jesus says that, when he's asked what is the greatest commandment, when he says those two statements, love the Lord your God and your neighbour as yourself, in a sense he's virtually summed up the whole of these 10 commandments. It's the outworking of loving God. In my Bible I've put down, I've forgotten where I got these headings from, but one writer said, within the 10 commandments, we as his people are given the sacred trust of, and then he lists them. And this first one is we're given the sacred trust of worship. And I think as a community of people, to know that, you know, God's called us to worship as a I can't think of a better phrase actually. This sacred trust. He's allowed us, enabled us, invited us into a relationship of worship.
Yes.
Which is in response to him.
And it's interesting to see both in the Old Testament, where he often talks about Israel as his bride and a marriage relationship. In the New Testament we find, you know, Christ and the church, that the marriage relationship is the picture that's used, you know, to give us an idea of what's involved in that. And of course the key thing with marriage relationship is it's an exclusive relationship based on promises that are made and that you have to keep. And of course the key thing, when we got married, forsaking all other, keep you only unto him, her, for as long as you both shall live. That's the thing, it's forsaking all other. It's quite exclusive, it's unique. And to start sort of straying off after alternatives, of course we'll come to adultery later in this series, but it's actually a betrayal of trust, a betrayal of the relationship. And God is sort of here is saying, this relationship between you and me, you are not to have any other gods. You belong to me. And it's in the same way that, you know, I belong to you, therefore I'm not free to have the same relationship with any other man. And that's not a great bondage. It's because, you know, the relationship
I'm the best thing that could have ever happened to her. I keep saying to her, it's grace that has kept us. She's needed a lot of grace.
But that's the thing, that the strength of the marriage is the fact that it's an exclusive covenant, and that, you know, the working out of that in practice is a sacred thing. And the reason it's so sacred is because it is a reflection of the relationship between God and man.
God and man,
you know, and And so yes, it's very important that, you know, it is exclusive.
Yes.
There's to be no other gods before me, he says. Yeah.
I didn't finish what I was going to say earlier, this given the sacred trust of, when Jesus says, love the Lord your God with all your heart and your neighbour as yourself, it's the sacred trust of that relationship with God, but it's also the sacred trust of community life, of family, of you know, our word, of property. It's those two statements of Jesus are the working out of these all of these 10 commandments, and in every area we use the word sacred. You know, our word is sacred, family life is sacred, people, and because it is holy, the whole of life is holy, belongs to God.
Yes, exactly. It's not available to anything else, and that's really important. And he has to be first in our life. Now, you know, Verity's sort of again.
Verity again? Yeah. My goodness me.
She's been studying this all week, and the poor girl didn't get to come and do it. You know, but yeah, she's sort of saying about you know, the other gods. It's not just that. Oh no, we're not going to go and worship, you know, pagan gods or you know, the gods of other religions. Actually, anything that takes a priority in our life over God is like a God that's coming before him. And she makes the point, I'm just trying to get the bit. Yes, other gods can be anything, possessions, desires, goals, or people that we treat as more important than God. Yes. So actually the whole principle of allowing something else to usurp God's place as the one whose will determines our decisions, that is breaking this commandment.
Shall we take a breather and give everybody else a breather?
Yes.
I think there might be some notices and then a song. Then we want to, well, I'd like to talk about, well, in worship, what Jesus says, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but render to God what belongs to God. Worship, what belongs to God. We'll develop that a bit more, and there's some more New Testament verses that but we'll have a few notices and a song, and then we'll continue. Another 15-20 minutes or so to talk about this first commandment, and can I say, Verity, we're really appreciating all your comments. My comment wasn't a criticism of you at all. And you've said you've got a couple of more points, and that's it for the night. Well, yeah, keep going. It's very good. We're going to quote you again in a moment. We want to pick up again on the that episode of Jesus' life after his baptism led into the wilderness to be tempted. And those temptations that came to him, particularly the one from the devil, that if Jesus bowed down and worshipped him, then he would have all the kingdoms of this world. And as rightly been said, that Jesus resisted that by holding to what God had said. But what an empty offer, though. What an empty offer. When Jesus, who had left, you know, that eternal glory with the Father, made himself of nothing and came to earth, and then all that can be offered is, well, what you can see here. I'll give you, you know, just this world. And
of course, it's a passing away set of kingdoms, you know, which Satan knows, but then, of course, he's a deceiver, so he.
Yes.
But yeah, the whole thing is, though, that the price of him giving him the kingdoms of this world without having to go to the cross and all the cost that would be involved there, was just worship me, do it my way. And of course Jesus answers by again quoting this principle here: no, it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve.
Can I just interject with another quote?
Yes.
Because elsewhere Jesus says, what would it profit a man if he gained the whole world but lost his soul? And that was what was being offered. Carry on.
Yes, exactly. You know, that I'll give you all the world, but give me your soul.
Yes.
Well, yes, and he wasn't fooled by that thing. No. But obviously, right back in the very beginning of the whole problem that this world is in, somebody believed Satan when he said to him, you know, why should you have to do what God says? You can decide what constitutes good and evil. In other words, you can make your own rules.
Yes.
It's the complete opposite of what here, where God says, I tell you what pleases me, and what pleases me is good.
Yes.
What does not please me is evil. So here is he defines what constitutes good and evil. It's not, you know, what the current mores of the culture around you is saying. It's actually what he says is good is good. And you know, the very first bit we have in the beginning in Genesis, you know, where Adam and Eve sort of are fooled into thinking that they can be like God and make their own rules, has actually ended up with slavery to the one who deceived them and then held them in his grip. And now we're going to learn what it is to be free again.
Yes.
You know, because God has provided the way of salvation, and now God is showing us how you can live free. So it's not going to be a burden of heavy, onerous slavery. It's actually going to be freedom, but freedom in his definition.
Yes. That's reminded me of another quotation I wrote down earlier. I think this came from the Bible Speaks Today series, which is very good. Recommend that. I think it was from the writer there, who says, obedience to God's ways, I like the way he puts it, triggers in us the image of God. It takes us back to what we were meant to be. It's removing all the damage that sin and rebellion would do. That in obedience to God and his ways, this is how life is meant to be. This is us created in the image of God, that we don't murder, we don't take other people's property, we don't steal, we keep our promises, we put God first. That's how it was meant to be.
That's right.
And it takes us back to the creation before the fall. And so it is that redemption, it is restoration, it's recovering again.
Yes, and actually becoming like God in his image.
The right way.
That's right, because I mean, Satan said to him, oh, you know, God says you mustn't eat that fruit because he knows you'll then be like God. And you sort of think, they were like God. They were made in his image. They reflected his nature and his character. They even had his ability to love freely from choice. And they lost it all because they were trying to take over basically trying to take over the helm of the ship, weren't they?
Trying to be God. Yes. So in worship, there's been some very helpful definitions of worship, and we know we can sing while we worship, but there's been a lot of confusion in the church over the past couple of decades that worship means singing. But what
or even it means a church service. Now obviously our singing should be worship. Our church service is worship. But actually Paul tells us that our whole life is to be worship.
Well, this is what I want us to explore. When Jesus said, render to Caesar what belongs to Caesar, but to God what belongs to God, what is it that exclusively belongs to God? Let me just see. Okay, they're commenting on them. Okay. Fiona, let me ask you that question then. I'll answer it myself first. Paul, when he's writing in Romans, when he's talking about worship, and he's outlined the amazing grace that God has done for all of mankind, and then he says, offer yourselves as living sacrifices, which is your reasonable or acceptable worship. And the bottom line is, our life belongs to God and to no one else. It belongs to him. Put him first, and then the other relationships fall into place. We've heard of, and we've got some personal experience of companies which demand the soul of their employer, of their employee. They dictate their family life, their time. So much. They take over control. But our life, in its entirety, actually, we give to God, and that, Paul says, is acceptable. It's a reason. It's a right thing to do.
Yes.
Because it belongs to God as a redeemed people of God.
Yes.
You were bought not with gold or precious gems, but with the precious blood of Jesus.
Yes, twice over, really, because I mean, in the first place, our life belongs to God because
through birth and rebirth.
He gave it.
You've got
we
a double
didn't
act
make
going
it.
on here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then it doubly belongs to him because he has redeemed it through the blood of Christ. So yeah, I mean, my life never was my own. I didn't do anything to get it, and you know, when the time comes, I won't be able to hold on to it longer than he lets me.
No.
And likewise, you know, when it comes to our new life. We didn't do anything to get it. It's the gift of God in Christ. But then, as Paul says, you're not your own. You were bought with a price.
Yes.
So glorify God in your body. And that's the thing, that it's meant to be the offering of our whole spirit, soul and body to him. Which...
Yes. And then we have to ask the question, so what is your life? But it is who I am, what I do, what I think, what I have,
what I say.
It encompasses everything, doesn't it?
Yes.
So everything I am and everything I have and everything I do, everything I want to do, you present that. We love the old hymn, take my life.
And let it be consecrated, Lord, to thee. Yeah.
That's just got me for a moment. And if we sing that from our hearts, take my life and let it be. And then in the song we spell it out, take my silver, take my voice, take my time.
Yes, take my love, take myself. Yes.
And I will be always, yes.
Yeah.
And that is worship. That is putting God first. So we don't put the religious, the Christian, the God bit in a box. And we've done our... I meet so many people who aren't Christians and aren't believers and haven't got a clue. And in joking, they think, in a conversation, they'll say something, oh, well, Clive, I'll go to church on Sunday, you know, as if that will do something.
Yeah, do his bit for God.
I don't want to go to church, but I'll go to church on Sunday. But the worship springs from an outpouring of the whole of life.
Yeah, one of Verity's comments here.
Yes.
We do have to keep turning to him as other things always try to take over. It's a conscious decision to put him first, and one that we have to keep making. I think that's the absolute nub of it. It is a conscious decision. It's a choice of our will. And fundamentally what it means to put God first and to worship only him is that we actually surrender our will to him. And he doesn't force us to do that, because he's not somebody who dominates your will. He's given us free will. But actually, if we're worshipping him like Jesus did, we surrender our will to his will, because we know that his will is the best. And it's actually common sense, because it's also best for us. But it's best in the not just in the selfish, my own interests way. But actually that's what it fundamentally means. It means that I say, not my will, but your will.
Just going back to Jesus' response to the devil in the wilderness, Jesus said to him, away from me, Satan, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. And our service, what we actually do and how we do it, that is equated with our worship, which is what Jesus did. His life was obviously we know he laid down his life when he died on the cross, but all through his life and through his ministry, he's laying down his life for God, and that works out in laying it down for other people. One of the first sermons I preached, when I first started preaching, even I said they weren't that very good, but there was one that I remember. But the woman caught in the act, she was set up, and they brought this woman to Jesus, caught in the act of adultery, and we know the conversation Jesus had, and he didn't condemn her and said, "Go and sin no more." But then the hatred of the people, where it had been against this woman and accusing her, it's now on Jesus. And that's what he did all through his life with the diseased people, with the lepers, with the outcasts. He took the anger, the hatred that was on other people, and he took it upon himself because he stood in their place. And his worship to God worked out in service to other people. And it is that, well, which way am I going to go here? How am I going to respond? How am I going to act?
Yes, and that's yes. I mean, when we're looking at Jesus, we see somebody fulfilling this command of having no other God before him, and you see the victory and the power and the strength of that. Just when you were saying that, I was sort of thinking, like yes, when he was healing the sick, it's like he was taking their sickness, giving them his health, but their sickness didn't make him sick. No. Because actually his life is stronger than that. God's way, good defeats evil.
Absolutely.
And of course, ultimately, he takes our death.
Yeah. I was just going to say that.
Life. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that. Yes. Yes. Can we? I think you'll agree with us. This command is not onerous. No. It's not. Jesus said of the religious people, he said you lay heavy burdens on them like a wooden yoke across their shoulders, and sometimes you make them twice the son of hell. Oh dear. But he said, "Come to me. My burden, my yoke is easy, and my burden, well, it's not a burden. You embrace it willingly and gladly."
Yes, because my burden is light. Yeah. Yes.
We're coming to the end. Let's.
Yes.
We could keep going. Send in your comments. Say, keep going. Keep. I don't know if you know the old Puritan preachers who used to preach for an hour or even longer, and they congregate say, "No, keep going, keep going. We want more. We want more." An hour, only an hour. We want 2 hours. Well, we will stop soon.
Yes. I'm just sort of thinking whether because obviously, there's lots of illustrations coming through in this. Verity saying it can be a battle in our thoughts to put God first. It's important to remember that our behaviour comes from our thoughts.
Yes.
So yes.
Sorry, there was a comment somebody just put in. Keep going. We are going to stop. Sorry. Sorry, I'm interrupted. Go on.
Yeah. So yes. And the Verity's making the point, it can be a battle. Well, it is a battle because this is what Satan is desperately trying to trip us up on, because he does not want us worshipping God. He wants us to be giving our worship to him, which is, of course, what we do every time we give way to not the prompting of the Spirit, but the prompting of our flesh. We're giving worship to him. Yes. And that's what he wanted. He wanted to be in the place of God, and then he's sort of trapped us into thinking we can be in the place of God. So yes, it can be a battle in our thoughts. It can be a battle in our reactions. Maggie's putting the thing here. Maggie says, "I sometimes find that my first reaction isn't necessarily a godly one, but then God usually convicts me of that. I would love for my first response to be righteous," because the heart now is different. Yes. Even with our failures, our heart's desire is actually to do the right thing, not to keep failing.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I've got other thoughts going on now. The first disciples, it was said of them, people could see that they had been with Jesus. and this isn't laying down rules and regulations, but it's just being aware that if we live a life of worship and in every way we're honouring God, people will notice that. Our language, the way that we speak, the words that we use, how we respond when people annoy us, how we find an inner peace in testing and difficult circumstances. It will become obvious that actually God is first in our life, and that is transforming us into his image.
Yes. And of course it will also bring us immediately into confrontation with the prevailing culture around us,
who don't want,
which is not set up on that. What does God say about this? Right, let's do that. But no, we'll make our own rules, and what's more, we'll try and force you to do the same. That's where, you know, and it's the problem they would have had coming into Canaan with all these other gods around, and people trying to force them to follow their ways or deceive them into following their ways.
It was the apostles when they were arrested and they were told, well, we'll release you, but you're not to go out preaching anymore. And they said, it's all right.
Judge for yourselves, do we obey God or you?
Yes, we put God first. Yes. Which, and we often mention it, and it's right to do, that so many believers around the world are facing that. They're in hostile environments where the Christian faith is not permitted. They're holding on to that. They will not. It's the in Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego.
Yes.
We will not bow the knee.
Yes, our God is able to deliver us, but even if He doesn't, we're not bowing the knee to that idol.
And God will honour that. Read Revelation, the honour that is waiting those who've paid the ultimate price there.
Yes. And yes.
So we need to finish soon. Come on, Fiona.
I know. Yes, I know.
People joke in the church, it's cocoa time.
Just one last thing. I'm just reading that. You shall have no other gods before me.
Yes.
That before gets different translations, but it's not just that, we've got to put me first and then all the other gods can come into there. But actually, once you've got him in his place, there are no other gods. There's only him and his will. And in that will we find perfect freedom.
And the Revelation is full of songs, and quoted earlier, worthy. We should be playing the Hallelujah chorus now. Worthy is the that comes after that. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive honour and power and glory. We're going to pray. Well, Fiona's going to pray. We're going to pray for Verity and the family, that they a good health recovery there. Do you want to conclude in prayer?
Father, first of all, thank you that we can call you Father, that though you are God and you are God above all other, and you are just the so great creator of the universe, and yet we can call you Father. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for making us in your image. Thank you for inviting us into relationship with you. And we do want our lives to reflect your glory. We want to put you first, Lord, and not to let any other thing usurp your place in our lives. Lord, you know we sometimes fail in that, but that is our heart's desire, and we ask you to, by your Holy Spirit, keep going on the work within us that you've begun, as we become more and more into the image of Jesus, who's the perfect image of you, that, Lord, one day we might fully regain again that image of God that you created us to bear. Lord, that is our desire, and we want to keep this command to have no other God before you. So again, we just want to pledge our loyalty and our faithfulness to you in the name of Jesus. And then, Lord, also we just want to lift up Verity and the family to you. We just pray that very quickly she'll be restored to health.
Amen. Yes.
And that, yes, there'll be no repercussions for the others either. In Jesus' name, amen.
Going to do something different while Fiona was praying there. Do you remember the chorus? And we will serve no foreign God, or any other
heart's desire, Spirit without measure, unto your name I will raise my sacrifice.
Good evening to you. God bless.